Welcome to the deep dive. We're jumping straight into the latest buzz from OpenAI, GPT 4.1.
That's right.
Our plan today is to really cut through the hype and figure out what this new model actually means for, how we all interact with AI.
Yeah.
We're working from two main things. OpenAI's official GPT 4.1 Prompting Guide, that's by Noah McCallum and Julian Lee, came out April 14th, 2025. And also some great analysis from D Squared on YouTube, their video, What GPT 4.1 Reveals About the Future of Prompting, which dropped around the same time.
Good stuff in that one.
Definitely. So the big message seems to be, forget the old ways of bribing or yelling at your AI. GPT 4.1 is different. Let's unpack what's really changed and how you can actually use these updates.
Exactly. And it's not just, a small tweak. This feels like a pretty fundamental shift in how we need to approach communicating with these advanced AIs.
Okay.
We're going to really dig into what these changes mean for you, whether you're, say, a developer building stuff, a professional exploring AI, or honestly, just someone curious about where this tech is heading.
So those days of using all caps or crafting these super elaborate, kind of funny scenarios to get the AI to cooperate,
Yeah.
they're really over. What's actually changed to make that possible?
Well, the first thing you'll probably notice is how it follows instructions. GPT 4.1 is just much better at taking clear, direct instructions, literally compared to, say, GPT-4o. The OpenAI guide basically says, look, if the output isn't quite right, just add a simple sentence clarifying what you want. Usually that's enough now.
Okay.
This better understanding, it comes from architectural improvements, letting it interpret prompts more. Well, literally.
That sounds way easier to use. And the D-squared analysis picked up on this too, didn't it? Saying those old hacks, like the dramatic, the fate of the world depends on this prompts.
Yeah, exactly.
They're just not effective or needed for 4.1 or even other new ones like Gemini 2.5 Pro or Claude 3.7.
Totally. They're kind of obsolete now.
Yeah.
And this better instruction following, it's not just about simple Q&A. It feeds into something much bigger. It's absolutely vital for building more complex agentic workflows, where the AI acts more like an agent to get things done over multiple steps.
Agentic workflows, right, where the AI gets more autonomy to finish a task.
Yeah.
Okay, the OpenAI guide spent a lot of time on this. What are their main tips for making GPT 4.1 work well as an agent?
They boil it down to 3 key reminders you should probably include in your agent prompts. First one is persistence.
Persistence.
Yeah, you got to explicitly tell the model to keep working until the whole request is sorted out before it stops and gives control back to you.
Okay.
Their example prompt is something like, you are an agent, please keep going until the user's query is completely resolved before ending your turn. Only stop when you're sure the problem is solved.
Ah, so it prevents it from just giving up halfway.
Exactly. It tackles that old problem where models might give a partial answer or stop when they hit some sub-goal, even if the main task isn't done. It pushes for, end-to-end completion.
Okay, makes sense. Don't stop till the job's done. What's the second tip?
Second one is all about tool calling. You really want to push the model to use the tools you've given it access to. And crucially, tell it not to guess or make things up.
Right, avoid hallucinations.
Precisely. The prompt they suggest is, if you are not sure about file content or code-based structure, use your tools to read files and gather the relevant information. Do not guess or make up an answer. It forces it to check facts instead of inventing them.
Good. Verification over fabrication. And the third one was optional, about planning.
Yeah, the third is planning. This is if you want the model to explicitly map out its steps and then reflect on how each tool use went.
Okay.
The instruction is something like, you must plan extensively before each function call and reflect extensively on the outcomes. Do not do this entire process by making function calls only. Basically, don't just blindly call tools without thinking.
So prompt it to think out loud, essentially.
Exactly. It encourages a more methodical, reflective approach.
And just adding these 3 simple instructions gave OpenAI a big boost in their own tests.
A huge boost, yeah. They said it increased their internal SWE bench verified score by nearly 20%.
Wow, 20%. And SWE bench. That tests coding problem solving, right?
Yeah, real-world software engineering tasks. So a jump like that shows these instructions really change the game, making it a much more capable agent, not just a chatbot.
That's a massive improvement.
Yeah.
Yeah, the guide also talked about how you give the model these tools, didn't it? Something about the API.
Yes, absolutely. GPT 4.1 is better trained to use tools when you pass them directly through the OpenAI API's dedicated tools field. That's now the strongly recommended way.
So no more just describing the tools in the text of the prompt itself.
Right. They found that using the API's structured field actually gave them another, 2% increase on that SWE bench score compared to manually describing tools in the prompt. It's cleaner, more efficient for the model.
Okay, good tip. Let the API handle it. And what about naming the tools? Any advice there?
Yeah, clarity is key. Use clear, concise names and really detailed descriptions for the tools and their parameters. And for examples of how to use a tool, put those in a specific hashtag example section in the system prompt. Don't cram them into the main description field of the tool itself. Keeps things organized.
Got it. Keep descriptions clean, put examples separately. And that idea of making the model plan out loud, that planning instruction, that also helps with these agent tasks.
Definitely. Their tests showed about a 4% bump on SWE bench just by prompting the model to explicitly plan its steps. It's like asking it to show its work seems to lead to better, more thought-through solutions.
Okay, so agentic capabilities and clear instructions are really central here. Now, another big headline feature is the context window, right? GPT 4.1 has this massive, what was it, 1 million token window?
Yeah, 1M tokens,
Yeah.
which is huge. Think of a token as roughly a word or part of a word. 1 million tokens. That's like feeding it a pretty hefty novel all at once.
Wow, so what kind of new things can we do with that kind of capacity?
Well, it opens up a lot. Things like processing really large documents, maybe legal texts or technical manuals, re-ranking way more search results, pulling specific info out of enormous amounts of text, and doing multi-step reasoning that needs to connect dots across that whole huge context.
That's incredibly powerful. Analyzing a whole code base in one go, maybe?
Yeah.
But are there catches, limitations with such a big window?
There are nuances, yeah. So it does really well on needle in a haystack tests. That's where you check if it can find one specific fact buried deep in all that text. It's good at that, even up to the full 1 million tokens.
Okay.
But complex reasoning that requires understanding the connections across the entire context, that can still degrade a bit. It's one thing to find a needle, another to understand the whole haystack, you know?
That makes sense. Holding information isn't quite the same as deeply understanding all its interconnections. And where you put your instructions in that massive prompt matters too.
It does. OpenAI found the best performance comes from putting your main instructions at the very beginning and the very end of the context.
Both places.
Yeah. But if you can only pick one spot, the beginning seems to work better than just putting them at the end.
Interesting. And on this long context point, the D-squared analysis brought up Google's Gemini 2.5 Pro, right? They suggested that while 4.1's window is big, Gemini might actually be better at tasks needing that deep understanding across the whole context.
Yeah, they pointed to the fiction.live benchmark specifically. That test involves understanding and answering questions about entire stories.
Ah,
So it's a good point. While GPT 4.1 nails the needle in a haystack retrieval, benchmarks like fiction.live bench test a different kind of long context skill, more about synthesis and comprehension across the whole text. It shows retrieval isn't the whole story.
right. Different tests highlight different strengths. Okay, so it's not just size, but how it uses that size.
Yeah.
Got it. Let's switch gears slightly. What about using negative words in prompts, like don't or never?
Yeah, that's changed too. Because the instruction following is better overall, you can now more reliably use negating terms like do not, never, avoid, things like that.
Oh, good.
Earlier models sometimes struggled with negatives. You had to phrase things positively. But GPT 4.1 and similar models are better at actually obeying those don't do this commands. D-squared noted this too, makes prompting a bit more straightforward.
That is simpler. No more mental gymnastics trying to avoid saying not.
Okay, what about structuring prompts? Using delimiters like Markdown or XML, still important.
Oh, definitely. Using delimiters to break your prompt into logical sections, role, instructions, context, etc. is still a really good practice. Helps the model understand the different parts.
Uh-huh.
And interestingly, the OpenAI guide mentions that XML seems to work particularly well for system prompts, especially when there's a lot of context involved.
XML. That's interesting because Anthropic's Claude models have often favored XML too, right?
Exactly. It looks like maybe there's a bit of convergence happening there. XML might be emerging as a kind of preferred standard for structuring these complex prompts effectively for the latest generation of models.
Useful pattern to notice. And OpenAI also gave a general template for structuring prompts. They did. A basic recommended structure would be something like start with the role and objective. Then instructions may be broken down further. Then reasoning steps telling it how to think. Then output format. Then examples for few-shot learning. Then the context itself. And finally, repeat key instructions, especially like think step by step.
And for those really long prompts, you mentioned repeating instructions.
Yeah, for long context, repeating those critical instructions, especially think step by step at both the top and the bottom, seems to help reinforce them.
Okay.
Though they do mention this could interfere with prompt caching techniques, where keeping the start of the prompt the same helps efficiency. So, a bit of a trade-off maybe. But if you only put it once, put it at the top.
Fascinating how these best practices keep evolving,
Yeah.
okay? One area that sounds like a big leap is generating code changes, diffs.
Yes, this is a really practical improvement for developers. GPT 4.1 is apparently much better at generating accurate, well-formatted diffs for coding tasks. OpenAI even defined a specific recommended format called V4A that the model's been heavily trained on. The idea is to make it easier to create reliable patches for code.
V4A. What's special about that format? How does it work?
Well, it uses clear action types, add, update, delete. It includes file paths, obviously. And for changes, it shows some context lines before and after default is 3 lines.
Huh?
But the really key thing is it uses at markers to point to the specific class or function where the change happens. This gives much better context than just relying on line numbers, which can change all the time.
Ah, so it's context aware, not just line number dependent.
Uh,
Smart.
Exactly. And if one at isn't enough, because maybe a function name is repeated, you can use multiple at markers to pinpoint the location even more precisely.
And OpenAI actually provides code to apply these patches.
They do. The guide includes details on an apply patch tool, its format, and even a Python script apply patch.py way and implement it. They're really trying to make this usable out of the box.
That's helpful. Did they mention any other diff formats that worked well?
Yeah, besides V4A, they also found success with the search replace format that's used in a benchmark called Ader's Polyglot benchmark, and also a kind of pseudo XML format.
Okay.
The common theme seems to be formats that avoid line numbers and clearly show what to replace and what to replace it with, using clear start and end markers for the code blocks.
Right. Explicit boundaries are key. Now, just looping back quickly to tool calling, D squared had another point there comparing 4.1 to Gemini again.
That's right. While OpenAI highlighted their improvements, the D-squared analysis pointed to a benchmark suggesting Gemini 2.5 Pro might actually be performing better specifically on tool calling at the moment.
Okay.
So it's just another reminder that performance can vary. GPT 4.1 is strong, but maybe not the absolute leader in every single capability when compared across different tests and models.
Good context to have.
Okay.
Okay, let's try and wrap this up. We've covered a lot. What are the main takeaways people should remember from this deep dive into GPT 4.1?
I think the big picture is that GPT 4.1 really pushes us towards clearer, more direct communication with AI. It's got much stronger agentic abilities, that huge context window, and better coding diff generation.
Uh-huh.
But as D squared highlighted, you still need to understand the prompting nuances, and it's worth comparing its specific strengths, like maybe long context comprehension or tool use, against other top models like Gemini 2.5 Pro.
It really feels like we're shifting away from needing those weird prompt hacks, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Like the era of yelling at the AI or trying to bribe it with tips is kind of over.
I think so, yeah. It signals a move toward more mature prompt engineering. The focus is now on being really explicit and structured in your instructions, which hopefully leads to more reliable results.
So that makes you wonder, with these AI models getting better at literally following instructions, how does our role change, the human role in these workflows?
That's a great question.
If the AI does exactly what you say, does that put more pressure on us to be incredibly precise about what we actually want? What new challenges or maybe opportunities pop up when we have to define our intent that clearly?
That's absolutely the key thing to think about moving forward, isn't it? As we get better control through clearer instructions, the responsibility shifts more onto us to articulate things perfectly and think through the implications of those instructions. It opens up amazing possibilities for collaboration, for sure, but it demands a deeper understanding from our side. How does the model interpret this? What are the edge cases? It's an ongoing learning process for everyone.
Definitely food for thought. Well, if you want to dig deeper yourself, absolutely check out that OpenAI GPT 4.1 Prompting Guide and the D-squared analysis on YouTube. Try out these new prompting styles, see how they work for you.
Yeah, experiment.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.